to exit using the marked exits straight ahead on myself. So, Linda, if you wish to say anything?
Yes, just in terms of recording the meeting, any meeting is open to the public and any person present is permitted to report the proceedings by filming photography or making an audio recording of the proceedings at the meeting, using any other means for enabling persons not present to see or hear the proceedings of the meeting as it takes place or later. We would ask that any person recording is requested to focus on recording councillors, officers and the public if they are directly involved in the conduct of the meeting. And obviously no recording should take place of children, vulnerable persons or any members of the public present who object to being filmed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Linda. So we'll move to our agenda. First item is apologies for absence, and I don't believe we have any. So next is declarations of interest. Councillor Jarvis.
Just for clarity, I am a governor of St Martin's Mary School in Windermere, which is affected by the admissions policy later on, but I don't think it's in any way because we're not.
Okay, thank you for that. Item. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Yes, I'm a member of the Lake District National Park Authority, but not on its planning because it's in terms of item 18.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any more hands. So, item 3 is potential exclusion of the press and the public. So, we do have potential part 2 item on our agenda in relation to item 14, but hopefully we won't need to go into part 2. If we do, we'll do so at that time that that arises. So we'll move on for that. So item 4 is the minutes of previous meeting. So again, those found in our agenda pages 7 to 18. I'm happy to pose those. Councillor Bell, second. Do we have any questions or comments? We're happy to accept those minutes. All those in favour, they indicate. Thank you. Thanks very much. Next item is public participation. We don't have any. So item 6, statement from leader and cabinet member. Just wish to make reference to our net zero event yesterday, which was held at Carlisle Racecourse, led by the LEP, and just want to say that I believe that was a great opportunity for particularly businesses, but all of us to think about the very significant challenges that we face in respect of climate emergency and biodiversity loss, and very well attended meeting, and I think it did go well. It was got a little bit feisty in places, as you might expect, with an agenda item covering net zero, but overall I think it was very positive. Councillor Archibald may wish to make a specific reference to that, but again I think it really showed we had input from ourselves and from Cumberland Council, but again it showed very much the aspect of leadership that we are committed to as we move towards our net zero goals. Just also say we have a very full agenda in front of us today for this meeting and later on the Highways and Transportation Board. So it's good to see steady progress being made in the life of the new council and various policies and actions that we are taking. So hopefully today will be again a significant day in moving the authority forward. So I do want to thank particularly again officers for their hard work in preparing all these papers, and also to members for their involvement also in getting us this far. So thanks to all concerned. So I don't know, do any members of Cabinet wish to make any comments at this point? No? Okay, we'll move on then. Quite happy to do that. So Questions to Cabinet members. So our Constitution provides the opportunity at this meeting for Westmorland and Furness councillors to ask questions of Cabinet members. So do we have any questions for Cabinet members from members of Westmorland and Furness Council? Doesn't look like it this morning. Okay, thank you. We move to item 8, which would be referrals from council or overview and scrutiny committees, and I understand that there are no such referrals on our agenda today. So that means we move to the first substantive item on our agenda, which is Westmorland and Furness Council Plan Delivery Framework. This is item 9 on our papers. So this is page 19, and speak to this. And again, just want to say that I am delighted to be able to introduce this item, our new Council Plan Delivery Framework, as part of our agenda for your consideration this morning. And I do want to say that the document, and that is appended to the papers, builds on our previously published Council Plan. And in our Council Plan, we set out our overall priorities and our ambitions as the new Westmorland and Furness Council, with a vision of making us a truly great place to live, work and thrive. That is for all members of our various diverse communities across our significant geographic footprint. The delivery framework builds on the foundations that are set in our council plan and provides some detail there in terms of setting out our bold missions across 10 different themes, and you'll see those identified for you in the document, from housing, transport, culture and the environment, which you've already mentioned as part of my introduction. And it explains, this is a key thing with this document, how we will move towards success in those missions, and details the actions that we will be taking, particularly in our first year council. So, for example, launching our climate change action plan, delivering levelling up programmes and establishing locality boards, again, which we already have done, and they're up and running, and tackling a range of issues that we face, that we recognise, including our housing crisis. So, to anyone unsure about what Westmorland and Furness Council is about, the framework provides that clear and compelling picture of the scale of our ambition for our area, for our communities, and for the services that we deliver. Now, we do know that achieving everything that we want won't be easy. We've got significant challenges. One of our values is very much collaboration, and that came out time and again yesterday, particularly at the Net Zero conference. But collaboration will be key to our success, collaboration with our partners, to different communities, to collaboration with town and parish councils. I want to reiterate that Westmorland and Furness is committed to that principle of collaboration. So, this is not a document that is going to gather dust on a shelf somewhere. It will be a touchstone, and as members and officers, we will be focused on the action and the delivery that is contained in the document. We will be setting up regular reviews. We will be implementing measures that will track our progress towards our goals, because that performance management is critical. Still saying what gets measured gets done. So I would like to offer once again my thanks to officers, to Cabinet member colleagues in the room today for their work getting us to this point. I know it has been a significant task. It's another step on my journey, and I hope you share my enthusiasm, indeed excitement, for what the framework sets out, and that you'll join me in recommending it today, and as it will progress to full council later this month. So I'm happy to propose recommendations. thank you. So, do we have seconder, Councillor Bell? Thank you. Do you wish to say anything at this point?
Yes, please. I'd just like to add to my thanks to yours to officers for the huge amount of work that's gone into this and for the hours of discussion that I know that they've had with a wide range of people. I really feel that this is a significant step forward for our new council. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Hughes.
Well, the document is very comprehensive, as you and the Deputy Leader already said. I'm particularly pleased as the portfolio for transport to see that the connections section, which covers both transport access and digital connectivity, is high placed in the document. We're assured that no section has a greater priority than others. Nevertheless, it's pleasing to see it there. And I note the comments that we, on page 34 of the agenda, that we want to improve transport choice and digital infrastructure. And in that context, I welcome the reintroduction of a number of new bus services within our area, notably 530 through to service from Grange to Carmel towards Kendal, but also one, I believe, from Barrow into Cumberland. So I think this is hopefully testimony that we're, as you've already said, Leader, we're already getting cracking. It won't be straightforward. Some things will take much longer, we know, than others too, but nevertheless, I certainly in my role would like to affirm that we're very serious about this, whilst recognising the huge difficulties there are in enabling good access in a largely sparse area such as that.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Councillor Thornton.
I feel delighted that I have to welcome the fact that the lead picture in the whole document is fixing the roads and clearly recognising the importance of that. But actually, we've talked a bit about photographs in the past, and I welcome the fact that the majority of the pictures in here are about people. And our council is about people, and our area is about people. And so I think that's a very appropriate acknowledgement by the photographs in this report.
Okay, thank you. So, any other questions or comments? So, it's been proposed and seconded. So, all those in favour, would they please indicate? Thank you. It's been carried. So, we move to item 10, which is for us on page 65, and this is the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act 2000. Now, this is if you like, a procedural document. It's something that all councils will consider. So Section 1 there sets out the background to the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act 2000, and our today it's on our agenda because hopefully we will approve the regulation of the Investigatory Powers Act and REPA policy. So Section 1.2 also indicates that the report that we have before us is updating us on the REPA inspection that will be taking place in respect of the new Westmorland and Furness Council, and that's happening on the 11th of October, and it provides Cabinet with an update of surveillance activity since April 2023, since vesting date, and it indicates that no applications in relation to this matter have been applied for. So recommendations there identified for us in Section 2 that we approve the regulation of the Investigatory Powers Act 2000 policy, which is attached to our papers in Appendix 1, and that we delegate authority to the Chief Legal Officer and Monitoring Officer in consultation with myself and the Deputy Leader to make any amendments to the policy where required as a result of changes in legislation or as a result of the inspection which is taking place on the 11th of October. And that we agree that training in respect of this Act should be added to the council-wide officer training programme. So hopefully there's nothing too contentious in respect to those recommendations. Section 3 there gives us a little bit more background to the need for these recommendations that we have today, and a little bit of background into what this is all about. So providing a framework basically under which authorised regulators are able to carry out surveillance activities and assess communication data which would otherwise not be legal because of the impact on human rights, and therefore it is a significant matter, and it's right that we have an idea of both what we can do and a record of what we have done, which, as I say, we have not made use of those powers. So, also section 3.4 talks about a bit more about the inspection that will be taking place, and the purpose of that, section 3.4.1, to assess our system structures and policies that we as the new council put into place to ensure that we are compliant with REPA, and that we entail meetings with key officers and examination of any authorisation since the creation of the council, and hopefully that will provide reassurance to the officers. Normally, one would expect that after this inspection, which is, as the report makes clear, physical inspection, we would expect further inspections on a 3-yearly basis. So I think with that, I'll propose those recommendations. I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Hughes, do we have any questions in relation to this matter? Do you wish to?
I just a couple of comments, Chair. Be very brief. Clearly, data control, personal privacy, and as you said, human rights are essential to our residents' security of mind. So we do need a policy, a strong policy like this that we can enforce. Some, as you said, some surveillance activities are necessary, such as monitoring underage sales of products, and so we carry that. But I think we all would believe that the amount of such activity should be robustly constrained, and therefore I welcome the sections of the report which identify precisely where the limits of officers' powers are, including legal officers' powers, so that we can actually do the best possible job here in everybody's interest.
Okay, thank you. So, don't see anyone else wishing to comment. So, again, we proposed and seconded. All those in favour of the recommendations there. That's great, thank you. So, we move to item 11, which is the Locality Board's Community Grant Scheme. So, I look to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Peter. So this report coming to Cabinet now has a primary purpose, which is, you will see in the recommendation, section 2, page 29, the purpose is to approve the terms of the Community Grant Scheme as set out in Appendix 1 to be administered by the locality boards. So the locality boards are a distinctive feature of this council, and we've sort of got used to them and their existence, but actually it is quite an unusual move, and one that I think we should be very proud of, in that it gives all 65 councillors the opportunity and the powers to be able to deliver what they have been elected for by their constituents in a meaningful way locally. So long ago, the Secretary of State, in that momentous announcement of how unitary Cumbria would be divided, said that this split into Westmorland and Furness and Cumberland was to enable local decision-making. So I'm not 100% sure what the Secretary of State had in mind with that, but we have run with it, and develop these locality boards which will meaningfully deliver what the Secretary of State suggested. So if I could invite you to turn to page 135, you'll find set out the general criteria, the guide to the application process, and terms and conditions of funding. So this document, if agreed today, will enable locality boards to deliver aspects of the vital community work which is their responsibility, in particular allocating funds which have been delegated to them, if you like to see on paragraph 7.1. So the advantages of such projects to the community, to the economy, and indeed to the council can be seen set out in paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2 on page 130. There are throughout this paper, this report, references, and indeed in the document that we are coming to approve today, references to the voluntary community, faith and social enterprise sectors who will be key partners in administering and delivering these projects. Town and parish councils are also key partners. The report contains references to the complex inheritance of grants, policies and processes from legacy councils, as well as to the continuing research and work to formulate future policies and governance, which will bring together clearly and comprehensively such matters as commissioning, procurement, social value, as in paragraphs 1.2, co-production and community power, as in paragraph 3.15, the complex picture of legacy grants, as in 3.18, and local representation and self-determination, as in 4.1. So reaching final conclusions within this complexity will take time and consultation, especially with the VCFSE and independent sectors. And I ask you to note that this work is not expected to be complete until February 2024. In the meantime, however, there are funds to distribute to the community, excuse me, and this report sets out a scheme by which this can be achieved transparently and with good governance. I'd like to thank at this point officers and others for getting this far and encourage them to continue with this demanding and complex work. So I will formally make the recommendation, as in 2.1, that we today approve the terms of the community grant scheme as set out in Appendix 1 to be administered by the locality boards. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Taylor, and I'm happy to second this important document. Again, I think as you've outlined clearly, we have the direction of travel here, setting up locality boards, and this is an example of, again, us supporting, giving power to localities via their elected members. So I think that's, again, a practical demonstration of our commitment in this regard. So, do we have any? Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Leader. I fully support this proposal and understand why it's been put in this form. I just want to raise really one issue for sort of future consideration by officers and members. I notice under 2.4 it clearly states that for the policy that grants will be awarded for one-off project costs, e.g. purchase of equipment, building work, refurbishment costs, etc. I fully understand that because we don't we need to be very careful about having ongoing commitments from this council. However, I think we need to also recognise that there are some community schemes which have which are ongoing and need funding, and sometimes search for capital investment may actually be a misguided process. If I may give an example, I have to declare an interest as treasurer of the 597 bus in Windermere. This would enable us to apply for a capital grant, for example, for a bus, which might then sit around and or pay for full, but a capital grant may mean that we would require a bus which sits around empty, not doing anything most of the week, but does not allow an application for funding towards commissioning a service. Now, I fully understand why the policy is this at the moment, but there clearly are groups, I think, well beyond mine, I think things like food banks, youth groups and things like that, that may require some degree of operating expenditure support. And so in future policies, I would be grateful if we could think about whether there are ways in which this can be embraced without us committing the council to support that is an ongoing constraint upon us. As I say, I fully support the policies here at the moment, but it does slightly concern me that sometimes the focus of our council and many other grant bodies on one-off capital costs can actually constrain the activities of important community groups and other services.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I'm sure we'll take those on board. Yeah, Councillor Hughes.
Just for Councillor Jarvis's awareness, I'm sure he does know this, but groups wishing to already operate in community commission bus services can in fact apply under a separate regime to the locality, whichever the three locality boards are operating for consideration for grant support. Under a present a 1-year scheme, more news indeed.
If I may come back, as my name was mentioned, it was not spoken. I was using that as an example rather than as it's my bigger concern is for things like, as I say, food banks or youth groups and things like that, which require, by the nature of their activity, most of their expenditure is operating, ongoing expenditure, not capital.
Okay, revenue. So thank you for that clarification, Councillor Hughes and Councillor Jarvis, and again that highlights the fact that although we're considering the community grant scheme today, there are a range of other grants available through this council, and we are making strenuous efforts to support third sector and other organisations to deliver those valuable services, which they do right across the area. And again, we're very mindful of that. I did mention our collaborative approach earlier on, and that's an example of that. So we do have a range of community and other grant schemes. So yes, so we do have. Please carry on.
I was just going to come in and say similar, and one of the things that we are doing on the poverty side is looking at all the voluntary groups who are working with us to help those residents who are struggling financially and in other ways, and looking on how perhaps we move from giving out grants to more service level agreements, with the idea that gives more continuity of funding to these organisations like food banks who are doing very valuable work and work in partnership with us, and how we can look at it more in the long term rather than the short term. Grant funding tends to be more short term, while service level agreements are more longer term, and we're looking at how we can do that. We're reviewing all our funding in that way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jarvis. So, anyone else? I don't see anyone, so being proposed and seconded. All those in favour of this item, please show thank you. That is carried. So, we now move to item 12, which is the Westmorland and Furness disposal policy. So, Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it's just over 6 months, just under 6 months, since we brought together 3 district and borough councils and half of Cumbria County Council. And we're currently, as a council, taking steps to make all these disparate elements function as one body. Now, on the terms of assets, the new Westmorland and Furness Council owns around 1,750 assets in total. And that's if you exclude the housing stock, which all comes under different rules, of course, and we're not considering in this paper. Some of these assets are surplus at the moment and have no current use. Others will become surplus when we've had time to review them. Some of our assets are going to be surplus because of duplication. When you bring 3 councils together, there's bound to be 4 councils together, there's bound to be duplication. And some may become surplus in the future as we transform our services and we alter how we deliver services. And we clearly need a good and secure process to be followed when we dispose of our assets and our property. And if you look at 3.6 in the paper, we can see the steps that we propose to follow when an asset is surplus. So stage 1 is when an asset is declared surplus to the service needs. Now it is important to say that this process is driven not by the property department or by the assets portfolio, but by the services themselves. But when a service decides that an asset is surplus, then it goes to stage 2, and the asset is offered for use by other areas of the council. Clearly there can be assets that can be used by several areas. If it is not needed, we go to stage 3. And actually, when we come to the item after next, we'll have an asset that's reached stage 3, which we'll talk about then. And stage 3 is to retain that asset to generate income for the council, if that aligns with our council plan. Stage 4 and stage 5, I think, are viewed together, as it were. They're not necessarily in this order, but viewed together. And that's to screen the asset for transfer to partner organisations that help us deliver our council plan, and then the community asset transfer. And I won't say much about that because we've got a paper on that follows this. Chair, we do need to thin out our assets. The buildings need maintenance, and the requirements for maintenance will only become more expensive as new environmental regulations begin to be applied. We need to thin them out, and this policy ensures that we identify assets for disposal in a careful and considered way. Therefore, I'd like to move the recommendations as in 2. So the first recommendation to adopt the property disposal policy attached to Appendix 1, and next to recommend to Council the required amendments to the Constitution attached to Appendix 2. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thornton, for that introduction. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jarvis, do you wish to say a further comment?
Yeah. Just a very few words. I mean, thanks to the officers who worked on this. I mean, it's been it affects many different portfolios, and so I mean, the feedback we've received from other people has been very useful. I can only emphasise, I think, what Councillor Thornton said. It's really important that we have a clear policy and approach towards disposals and reviewing our portfolio of assets. It's important to have that clarity for officers to know the process to go through, for members to be aware of where they're involved in the process, and the public to know that we have got a transparent and clear process, and to ensure that we treat our disposals and our property portfolio, asset portfolio, rigorously and professionally. I welcome the clarity within this. I particularly welcome, there are a number of constitutional amendments that result from this, I believe, which we're going to be going forward. I'm pleased that explicitly asks for evidence of local member consultation, so that there is that consultation between communication flows going on. But as I say, it's critically important we have a clear and robust policy. I think this document in front of you gives us that, and I heartily welcome it.
Okay, thank you. So, any other comments? Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everybody for indeed consulting with me as a member for sustainable communities and localities over this policy, and indeed the one that we'll discuss in the next agenda item. Every asset that's on the list of assets is also something which has a lot of meanings and uses locally, And so I'm satisfied that we have really tried to ensure that that local people will be consulted, properly consulted, and that everything will be evaluated in a way that has a dialogue which is transparent over these processes. So thank you for that. I'd just like to mention here, and indeed, so I won't say it again in the next one, that we have been working, co-producing with CALC, a compact of the relationship between parish and town councils and Westmorland and Furness Council, and that this one of the key features of that relationship will fall under these two agenda items, this one and the next. So I'd just like to assure everybody that we are all in dialogue from all the different interests within, if you like, the council, and that we'll continue in dialogue with the communities as well. I think that's. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Anyone else wishing to speak? Don't see anyone, so I'd just like to add also my thanks and agree with the comments that have been made. I think this is a step forward in terms of clarity. It's a step forward in terms of community involvement and transparency in that process. And so I'm very happy that we move to the vote on this. So all those in favour, would they indicate? So again, that is carried. Thank you very much. So next item dovetails in with this. So this is item 13, West Furness Community Asset Transfer Policy. So Councillor Thornton once again.
Thank you, Chair. And both of these items, as Councillor Taylor indicated, have taken a lot of work by various officers, and I would like to thank them all for their work and their patience with this. It has taken some time, but it was important to get this right because of the community interest in some of these assets. But of the 750 odd, some of them are very well known to the community, and some of them are things that frankly nobody probably knows that we own anyway. There's a huge variety when you start looking at the list. But the disposal policy we've just adopted referred to community asset transfer as one of the options which are considered before ultimate disposal by sale on the open market. And the previous councils making up Westmorland and Furness Council have a long history of community asset transfers. Some of these have been successful and some have not. When they work well, a community asset transfer can enrich the community and can help fulfil our council plan. When they fail, and I have been involved in picking up some of the pieces in the past, they can take a great deal of resource to put right, and importantly, they can cause huge stress to well-meaning members of the community who've been involved in them. We don't do any communities a favour by allowing them to take over a transfer which then fails at a later stage. This policy is designed to enable asset transfer when there is a good chance that the transfer will be successful. It also provides a check when community ambition may have resulted in an over-ambitious proposal with little chance of success. And it's important that we do recognise that. Community asset transfers are not an easy process. They're a long and time-consuming process, and care must be taken to protect all concerned. As I said, it's a time-intensive process both for the community organisation and for the council. These processes are often controversial, and if the council turns down an application, it's essential that we are both transparent and consistent in this. This policy attempts to achieve both of these aims. And so with all of this in mind, I move the very complex recommendations, which I will read out in full, because they are important. So recommendation 1 is that we adopt the final version of the Community Asset Transfer Policy as attached to Appendix 1. 2 is that we delegate the assessment of the applications to the Community Asset Transfer Review Group. Now, this group includes 3 assistant directors, corporate assets, fleet and capital programme, safe and stronger communities, community infrastructure, and where required, officers from other relevant directorates. Next recommendation, we delegate to the Community Asset Transfer Group the authority to recommend supported applications to Cabinet and to decline those that don't meet the criteria. These recommendations will be made in consultation with the leader, the Cabinet Member for Highways and Assets, and the Cabinet Member for Sustainable Communities and Localities. Each application will be assessed on its own merits in the context of the framework set out in this CAP policy. The technical business case assessment by officers will be subject to final review by the Community Asset Transfer Review Group. And this group, as earlier said, includes 3 assistant directors and relevant officers from across other directorates. If transfer is recommended, then the Community Asset Transfer will then be subject to a Cabinet decision. And finally, we request that the Chief Legal and Monitoring Officer makes the required amendments to the Constitution. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jarvis?
Thank you, Leader. Again, there's been a lot of work on this, and I'm grateful to officers and for the consultation we've had. I must admit I strongly agree with everything that Councillor Thornton has said. Community asset transfers can be controversial, and we know that they can generate considerable excitement and heat at times. But we do need to ensure that we take the needs of both local communities and of the wider council into consideration. As Councillor Thornton said, we need to guard against over-optimism that we've sometimes, or the legacy councils sometimes seen in some of the previous community asset transfers, particularly over-optimism which results in this council, or could result in this council, having longer-term commitments, recurring commitments to support an asset that is being transferred out. And we also need to recognise, and it's not always easy, is that the wider value to the council may be of a disposal, may be greater than the local value in a community. And that is something that we have to balance out. This policy gives us clarity on the way in which these decisions will be reviewed, determined, and the process by which final decisions will be made. And I welcome this degree of clarity. I hope that this gives reassurance to communities that we will, that this council will consider positive cases for community asset transfer. At the same time, we can reassure our residents that we will also be looking and considering the total value of any transfer to this council and to the wider community. So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to second it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jarvis. Councillor Hughes.
Chair, first to say I won't be speaking on almost every item of it, but according to the prior notice I gave you this morning, I did receive last night some comments from Clifton Community Council, who are the parish council for the Clifton area, and if I understand correctly, they have 2 principal concerns about the policy, which I've referred to the assistant director who may wish to comment. One is that the community council doesn't actually feel that leasehold status, which is what the policy recommends for the way in which the asset is held by the community in paragraph 3.8. It is not felt by Clifton Community Council this constitutes genuine devolution or transfer of an asset. And the second concern in conjunction with that is that they feel that, and I haven't had time to look into that, they feel that this might mean an asset being transferred in not the best of conditions it could possibly be in there. These are not my observations, Chair, but I did undertake on behalf of the Community Council of Clifton, which is in my ward, that I would pass these comments on. So I welcome any contributions from either the portfolio holder or the Assistant Director.
I think, Peter, do you wish to go? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The principle of transferring on a long lease is well established with community asset transfers. It allows the council to ensure that the use is in line with that which is intended in our council plan. I mean, some of the assets that we might transfer might be worth very little on the open market for the use that they're intended for, but might be worth a huge amount for different uses. And clearly the council has to protect the future use. And a leasehold allows us to do that. So I think that's perfectly appropriate. I think the thing that needs to be emphasised is that we will look at the length of the lease, depending on the usage that it's going to be put to. And we will make sure the lease, or intend to make sure that the lease is long enough to enable any grant applications, etc., for that usage. That's when the length of the lease sometimes comes into play. On the condition, I'm not sure which assets have been referred to here, but any assets we transfer will be in a safe condition. And of course there'll be a negotiation as part of all of this, and the condition of the asset will be taken into account. So I think if Clifton have concerns about individual issues, they need to come to us and talk to us about those, and we'll be happy to talk to them on the basis of this policy, assuming that we pass it in a couple of minutes' time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thornton, for those comments.
Check, let's add one further brief comment. In terms of the expectations of any proposals which are detailed in paragraph 3.17, I'm fully in harmony with these, but I hope that the scope of expectations will be kept under review between in a strategic way between the council and whoever takes on the asset, so that nobody involved in the arrangement feels that this is an inflexible, unchanging arrangement which doesn't allow any imagination. It doesn't mean we're changing the conditions of the transfer, but it means that actually there'll be scope for constructive utilisation of the asset.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for those comments. I think, as I mentioned in respect of earlier item, the council plan delivery framework, it's not the intention that this council that any of our policies or plans sit on the shelf, and gather dust. That not the intention of this council that we are inflexible, and indeed I was going to comment in response to Councillor Thornton's answer to the question that you posed, that these things are being put in place to allow flexibility and allow the most appropriate responses. And so in line with the spirit of collaboration I've already made reference to, we certainly do want to be working with communities to provide the most flexible, mutually beneficial outcomes that we possibly can. And that is the purpose for which these documents are coming before us today. So, do we have any further comments, questions? So let's move to the vote. It's been proposed and seconded. Are we happy to accept those recommendations? We are. Thank you very much. So we now move to item 14, and this is the third part of a trilogy from Councillor Thornton, and I think this particular item once again demonstrates in a very practical way the ambitions of this council. So, Councillor Thornton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It follows on quite nicely from the other two. It's almost as if the agenda was carefully planned. We just adopted a policy about how we deal with surplus assets. This is based upon the former county council policy. And this policy was used in the former county council when we considered the use of a piece of surplus land in the Barrow area. So this piece of land was surplus to our service needs, was not required by any of our services, but was retained both as a potential for income generation and to help meet our ambition to move towards being a net zero council. And this process has culminated in today's proposal to build a 2 megawatt solar farm on this site. The report is full of figures and calculations, and I know you've all read it very carefully, but I'll just pull out the key figures here. So the solar farm will cost just under £3 million to deliver, and the average output is estimated at just over 2.5 million kilowatt hours per year. That figure sort of goes over your head, and it does mine. And you know, the normal policy is when you're looking at areas of land, it's football pitches. When you're looking at water, it's Olympic swimming pools. With electricity generation, it's kettles, isn't it? So this would boil 62 million kettles a year. I'm not sure how many kettles there are in Westmorland and Furness. Probably not as many as that. Another fact is it'll be equal to about 30% of our total electricity consumption as a council. And I think that's a really impressive figure. 30% of our total consumption will be covered by this. Now, of course, we don't use electricity directly. We feed it into the national grid. And members will, I'm sure, have heard in the press of difficulties in getting grid connections. And some councils are planning solar farms and saying they can't actually build them for 20 years because they can't connect in. I'm pleased to say that our officers have worked magic with this, and we have an agreement for a grid connection from the start. And that is a huge achievement, actually. Now, this report goes into some detail about the different ways that we can market the electricity. It gets a bit complex, but basically, as a council, we will be buying electricity and we will be selling electricity. Some agreements keep these transactions completely separate. So you sell it on one hand and you buy it on the other hand, and there's no connection. A sleeving arrangement links the two. So effectively, you're buying back your own electricity. Although, of course, once those electrons, those magic little things, disappear into the wires, no one knows where they go. And so who knows what you're actually buying back. But in theory, you're buying back your own power. Now, the industry of private generation, as it were, is beginning to mature, and these arrangements are almost certainly going to change over the next 35 years. And the recommendations later recognise the fact that this is a developing market, and it will change over the years. So what are the benefits of this project? Well, the cost of construction and the running costs are relatively fixed. We know the cost of construction and the running costs can be estimated pretty accurately. The income, of course, is highly variable. It depends upon the price of electricity, and I don't need to tell members of the volatility of this market. But using all our powers of crystal ball gazing, and I have every faith in our officers with this, we expect a net contribution of around about £400,000 a year. And crucially, we expect a positive contribution from day one. We talk about payback periods, but from day one, the income we get from this at the current price of electricity will be more than the cost of the capital used to construct it. So there's a positive benefit financially from day one. The next question is, what would happen if the price of electricity were to sharply drop? Let's be honest, if it fell far enough, then the cost of the capital and the operating costs might be more than the income received. In this case, our budget will be putting into this project rather than taking from it, but the benefits and the very large savings elsewhere in the council will be much more than this. And if, on the other hand, the price of electricity were to increase then the calculation would go the other way. The solar farm would be returning considerably more into our budget, but the council's overall budget would be challenged elsewhere by the increased cost of electricity. So Andrew here isn't looking for electricity to go whizzing up to make this more profitable while he's paying more somewhere else. I hesitate to use the word hedging. That tends to be associated with high finance in the City of London. But this is a hedge, and it can be looked as a hedge against the varying costs of electricity. And that's one of the benefits of this project. The other benefit, of course, is that this is clean and green power. We've had a lot of discussion about how we account for this, and there's quite a bit of discussion yesterday about how the accounting on carbon savings goes. I'm not going to get into the detail, others may wish to. I'm looking at Giles, who I'm sure will want to speak on this. But the quoted figure in this report is 600 tonnes of CO2 saving per annum, or it's equivalent to planting approximately 700,000 trees. However we refine our calculations in the future, I am certain this solar farm will make an important contribution to this council's targets in its fight against climate change. Finally, I would like to thank officers. I've referred already to their dedication to this, but there have been many hurdles to navigate here, but by both persistence and skill that brought us to this point, where we've got a viable project, and we've got a site, we've got planning permission, and we've got a grid connection. And as many councils in this country would like to be able to say that at this point. Chair, I'd like to move the following recommendations. The first recommendation is to approve the decision to build and operate for 24 months. Obviously, carry on operating after that. This is just the initial contract. A 2 megawatt solar farm at Sandscale Park, Westmorland and Furness. Operation after 24 months, subject to a separate contract. As I mentioned earlier, it's got about a 35-year expected life as this farm, with the the equipment that's put in there. Second recommendation, to recommend to full council to approve the scheme to be included within the 23-24 capital programme. Recommendation 3, to approve the award of a Stage 2 construction contract to Vital Energy Limited in the sum of 2.481 million to construct the farm for the reasons set out in the tender analysis report at Appendix 4. And finally, to delegate authority to the Director of Resources, Section 151 officer, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance and Highways and Assets, to undertake a selection process and enter into a power purchase agreement to PPA to sell electricity based on a sell-direct-to-grid agreement on commercial market terms. Now, Chair, that's all, hopefully, in part 1. I've stepped over the line there anyway. There is a part 2 appendix, and if the discussion moves towards that, we'll have to go into part 2. But at the moment, I hope we consider this in part 1 so that we can do it in a full, transparent way. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thornton, and thank you for bringing that to us in such a clear way. So you're making the proposal. Do we have a seconder for this item? Yes, so Councillor Archibald, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader, and thank you very much, Peter, for your remarks. Thank you very much, officers, for the work that has been done here. And yes, kudos to the Council for initiating this. Very, very pleased to be able to second this. I mean, often politicians are accused of being full of hot air. You know, we come in with ideas, and we tell people what we're going to do, and then we don't deliver. Well, this council delivers. Sometimes, you know, environmentalists, lovely people, great ideas, great suggestions, but they just can't close a deal. Well, we're closing this deal. And, you know, sometimes, and we had it yesterday actually, the event that Jonathan mentioned, that sometimes we're accused of greenwashing. But this ain't greenwashing. This is actually delivery. we made a commitment as a council that we would consider the climate crisis as an emergency, and that we would come up with actions that would show that we want to address the issue of climate change and biodiversity loss in a really serious way. Now, we can't be the solution, but we can sure be part of the solution, and this is part of the solution. So I don't really want to add to what Councillor Thornton said. I think he said it very clearly. I think the fact that, as it's mentioned in the book, we may effectively use part of this electricity or sell part of the electricity, all of these things still need to be resolved. The financial analysis on various different scenarios shows that this is really beneficial to our residents. So from a number of different perspectives, this is a great initiative. Hats off to everybody involved, and thank you very much, and I'm delighted to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, could I just ask, I don't believe you mentioned it, Peter, what is the current use of this land, and is there any loss to biodiversity or food production by covering it with machinery?
Councillor Thornton.
It's grade 5 agricultural land, which is a sort of bottom grade, very poor agricultural land. I'm informed there's no loss to biodiversity, and we will still be able to graze sheep on the land. I'm not sure whether they'll be council sheep or not, but I think we'll probably get someone else to provide the sheep. But there's very little loss to agriculture and not to biodiversity.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to Councillor Thornton for proposing this. Just for a financial portfolio holder, I think it's just worth making a quick comment. We've seen too many councils that have invested widely in commercial activity without really thinking about what is at the core of what they're doing. And I need to emphasise that this is not a case of us willy-nilly making commercial investments. Rather, this is about us making the best use of our assets. As already been said, this is land which we own and is currently grazed by a bit more than a handful, but a small flock of sheep. And we can do better than that. The commercial case for this is good, but it goes beyond that, and is an example where sometimes maybe a little bit more sophisticated financial assessment is really beneficial. We normally do a sort of nice standard base case, and as Councillor Thornton said, that shows a good return on investment here. But as we know, this project will also have a significant impact on the output of carbon dioxide equivalent. That has value for the country and the world. And indeed, as is made clear in the report, the Treasury Green Book would allow us to take the value of that into consideration in our decision making. And the midpoint of that social value for this project in first full year of operation, is about £150,000 of additional benefit. So that is the fact that that's saving other people, saving the world from having to carbon capture or reduce carbon dioxide in some other way. Now, we haven't taken that into consideration. It's not part of our commercial case, but we would be allowed to take part. So there is significant additional real value for us, for the world that's doing this. And secondly is the point that Councillor Thornton made, which is one about volatility. That this is a natural hedge. It will help, whatever the economics of this case, what it means is if the electricity price goes up, it doesn't cost us quite as much as it would have otherwise. And if the price goes down, no, we don't get quite as much of a saving, but it gives us more certainty. It's removing those ups and downs. And boy, we could do with that. We've seen the costs of inflation on the budgets, on our budget and on the budgets of the legacy councils, and how that volatility puts pressure on our operations, delivering services. So we need to recognise the value in having such a natural hedge. That in itself is worth value. It's worth resources to us to know that we've got a bit more certainty. So those two values which come over and above the commercial case, the core commercial case that Peter has outlined. We are a prudent council. We are not going to invest wildly in commercial assets that go. I don't see us investing wildly in commercial assets that go way beyond our boundary of our normal operations. This is covering less than a third, around a third of our electricity requirement. It is extremely prudent, it is extremely sensible, but it's also an ambitious thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. And I'm very, very pleased from a financial perspective to see the council making decisions such as this. Thank you.
Thank you. So, anyone else wishing to speak on this? Okay, well, we're going to the vote on those recommendations as outlined for us by Councillor Thornton. So all those in favour of this ambitious scheme, please indicate. It's clearly carried, so further work can commence. We look forward to getting updates on progress and to seeing the electricity being produced in the not too distant future. Great, so that's really good. So we've had a trilogy of presentations from Councillor Thornton. We now move to a trilogy of papers coming forward in relation to children and Councillor Sanderson. And the first of these is our next item, which is the Youth Justice Plan. So, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you very much. The Youth Justice Plan is a requirement from the Youth Justice Board. It's a statutory requirement. It has to state how the Youth Justice Grant is going to be spent to provide the statutory service of managing young people who come into contact with the criminal justice system. The plan this year reflects on the work that the Youth Justice Service completed as a pan-Cumbria service, and this was it was under LGR. It was decided that we would have separate youth justice services. So we've got a newly created youth offending board comprising of partners and chaired by the Assistant Director of Children and Families. The plan sets out the future aims and objectives to ensure that we have a high-performing service. It is due for inspection in any case, and the three priority areas that they've selected, and we've got a brand new leader for the Youth Justice Service as well, who started recently. And the three areas that they've made their priorities are effective interventions at every level, reducing reoffending, and improving outcomes for children and young people and families. It's an area of work that I'm familiar with because when I retired I worked as a volunteer with it, and I know and recognise the work that is carried out and how effective it can be to prevent young people going on to a career in the criminal sector of our communities instead of useful people. So that I would like to move the recommendations, which is to endorse the plan and refer it on to full council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sanders. Do we have a second for that? Councillor Derbyshire, do you wish to?
I was keen to second this, partly because my portfolio includes community safety partnership and violence against women and girls. And in fact, this morning I was in an update from Barrowful on the work they're doing. And I was actually thinking, as I was sitting listening to the work they're doing with schools, to work with people to look at children, to look at their attitudes, what is strong, how can we improve relationships. And I've been thinking of, there's a quote on page 59 that's come out of this report, saying they helped me realise how bad my mentality and attitude was, and how little education I had on relationships, and how it improved everything for me. I was thinking that quote as I was sitting and listening to the work that's proposed with schools, working with theatre, to be able to help them look at what is good when it comes to relationships. So I was grateful for this report because it increased my knowledge to do with working with young people, and so I'm very happy to second it.
Thank you. So, do we have anyone else wishing to speak on this? No? So let's move to the vote. All those in favour, will they please show? Thank you. So we move to item 16, so this is school admissions arrangements. So, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. The paper sets out our school admission arrangements for Westmorland and Furness for 2025-26, and it is in accordance with the School Admissions Code 2021. The papers detail the arrangements for schools where the local authority is the statutory admissions authority, as well as the coordinated scheme for other schools. We've not proposed any changes to the arrangements from the previous Cumbria position, and this is important to provide continuity and stability in meeting our statutory duties. There was also a note with the papers that the list of schools may change because of changes in category, where there is schools who decide to become academies and things like that. But these arrangements are the two areas of schools that are maintained by the local authority and the voluntary controlled ones, and then you've got voluntary aided, and you've also got academies as well as different types of schools. So this is an arrangement structure that is based totally on arrangements as Cumbria as an authority.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sanderson. And we should have members' copies of attached amendment in relation to this item. So members have seen that. So we do have a seconder. This item, Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for their work and have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, Councillor Jarvis.
Really, it's a question for officers, but I said beforehand, I'm totally in support of the policy at the moment. It is entirely right for us to take and continue with the legacy covering county council policy in this first stage. I do just have one question, and that's the use of the straight line distances as the crow flies. I understand that is an easy and unambiguous measure, but I do wonder whether, given the geography of our region, whether that is really the most appropriate measure, given, for example, that we have a linear landscape of lakes, peninsulas and valleys, which might mean that we have some slightly odd situations where somebody travelling all the way around the lake is regarded as being closer than somebody who is on the same side of the lake as the school, but not across the lake. And so really the question is, have we had any issues around this, and would it be something that we would consider reflecting on in future policies? But that is in no way objective to the policy that we have in front of us.
Okay, thank you. So it's an interesting question. I don't know.
Yes, I think we can consider that. There are mutually mining goals, right? So it's testing.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can consider it for the future. The challenge would be around some of the work around the geographical information system. You can use safe walking distances and such like that, but they're not coded in from the previous local authorities. So that's something we can look at for the following year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other?
Could I just add that it will go out to consultation when it's approved here, then that consultation.
Okay, so that can be considered as part of the consultation process. Great. So I don't see anyone else indicating. So that proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Please show. So again, that is carried. And so it moves us to item 17, which is the Children's Social Care Improvement Development Plan. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you. The plan particularly is a response from the Ofsted inspections and which is called IMAX, which is the inspection for local authorities children's services. And it is a continuation of that response that takes us forward to the end of the year, and we'll continue to work with staff about improving practice and engagement with young people and families. It was initially completed following the last Ofsted inspection in September 2022. And the main focus is the areas that Ofsted identified during the inspection that we're looking at particularly for improvements. And we're particularly looking at services for children in need of help and protection, and for our care for children and care experienced young people. Deliberately using those terminologies which are care for children and care experienced young people. These are the names that the children wanted to describe them, and that's why we're using them. I would have to check out Linda, the regular use of it, because we put the care leaver and care experienced into any documentation, but we're trying to use those two terminologies because that is what they asked for, that they could be referred in those categories. If you know, when you've had time to look at the plan, each theme will have a named lead officer responsible for the actions and checking over when the work is being completed. And the plan also undertakes to look at the current position of a brand new council running its own children's services and the development which we are undertaking of a new approach to families and very young people, early years children. And that is something that is being implemented under family hubs and early help. And looking at the plan, we'd be looking at December 23 to see that fully implemented. And we've got a project officer who's working solely on that to move that forward. So a lot of hard work going on in the background. And I did want to mention, which is not in the paperwork, so I do apologise, reader. But yesterday I went to an award ceremony for long service foster carers, and it was a lovely event, and these got awards for doing 10 years foster caring or 5 years foster caring, and so I felt very privileged to be with them and being able to chat about how things are going. So that's the recommendation, is to move forward and approve the plan for delivery. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you propose that. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bell. Yeah, wish to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to second this recommendation and to have the chance to thank the staff who I know have worked so hard in support of all our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this? No? So let's move to vote. Proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. Right, so this now brings us to item 18, which is the Griesbeck improvement scheme. Griesbeck being on K595. Implementation of compulsory purchase order and the side roads order. So, Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, to help ensure that the Council can proceed with the A595 Gleisbeck Improvement Scheme and to assemble all the land necessary for the construction and delivery of the scheme, it's recommended that Cabinet agrees, and this is subject to approval of the full business case and receipt of funding. Cabinet agrees to delegate in the implementation of the side road order and the compulsory purchase order to the Director of Resources and Director of Thriving Places, or in their absences, the relevant Assistant Directors, and for the Chief Legal and Monitoring Officer to take all the necessary action to help support implementation. This scheme will improve strategic and local connectivity between Furness and West Cumbria with improved journey times and better journey time reliability, and provide opportunities for walking, cycling and public transport. In addition, the scheme will enhance the resilience of the road to withstand severe weather events and preserve its function as an emergency diversion route for the strategic road network during periods of closure on the A590 between Dalton in Furness and Greenodd. It's important to note that the recommendations in this paper do not commit the Council to commencing with the scheme. However, they are an important process to enable the Council to acquire land by agreement where possible and to use its power of compulsory acquisition, or CPO, only where acquisition by agreement is not possible within the timeframes for the delivery of the scheme. So the confirmed side road orders authorises the side road works which are necessary to facilitate the delivery of the new A595, planning permission for which was granted in October 2022. The Council will make a future decision as to whether to proceed with this scheme, and that will be subject to government funding and approval of the full business case by the Department of Transport. However, to enable the Gleisbeck Improvement Scheme to continue to be developed in a timely manner, I recommend that Cabinet approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So, proposing those recommendations set out in section 2. Do we have a seconder for this? Councillor Hughes, do you wish to...
May I reserve the right to speak at the end of the debate?
Right. So, any other Cabinet members wishing to say anything on this item? Doesn't look like it, so I'm going to bounce straight back to Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, that's fine. That's completely my notes. Because I imagine Councillor Thornton might speak at great length. This is well, anyway, yeah, what you say is very relevant, Councillor Thornton. Thank you. And I welcome the project, and it's clearly, if completed, it would clearly fulfil government aspirations of linking the potential of the Barrow and Furness area, which is clearly within our council's geography, to the energy coast in West Cumbria, which now, of course, is part of Cumberland Council's remit. And I can see every reason why the government may wish to move the scheme forward, notwithstanding the fact that a number of key projects, or perhaps because a number of key projects scheduled for West Cumbria appear to have lost some of their momentum. I quote this, I'm not a nuclear expert at all, but I don't believe the spherical Tokamak nuclear scheme is going ahead. We've heard no more recently of any ambitions for the Moorside prospective nuclear reactor site. And of course, only yesterday, Chair, we were talking about the somewhat disappointing lack of progress on the proposed Energy Coast rail upgrade, which is on the line which connects the Sellafield area to Barrow at one end and to Carlisle at the other. So we're not absolutely clear what the government ambitions might be. As I said, and as Councillor Thornton said, the council would welcome completion of the road. However, we have a large number of equally important capital schemes that will be of vital value for our residents when they are complete. Leisure facilities, upgrade of council buildings and so on. And therefore, in the context that I've already referred to, it's very much hoped that the government will give the maximum moral and financial support to the scheme. When I read through it, there was a lot of pages here. I was more than a little disappointed that no specific public transport enhancements were included in the scheme. I think there's scope for reciting of one or two bus stops, but this is a £23 million plus scheme, and the government, of course, is committed to our country achieving net zero by 2050. And one would have thought in such an ambitious scheme that the government would be actually falling over itself to enhance public transport, in this instance, between Barrow and the West Coast. But unless I've missed it, I didn't see any evidence of that. So I'm fully behind the proposals that we have before us today, but I'm also fully behind comments that Councillor Thornton has made, that there is more progress to be made on the scheme, and we look very much to our prospective new government allies in Team Barrow to take much of this on board.
Okay, thank you. So, do we have anyone else? We don't. So, again, proposed and seconded. All those in favour, would you indicate? So, once again, that's carried. Thank you. So, that brings us to item 19 now, urgent items. I'm not aware that we've had any, so that brings us to the end of the agenda for this particular cabinet meeting. So thank you all for your contributions. Some significant forward movement there in those papers, so thank you all very much.